Hey there. Thanks for tuning in to this scary story. If you're new here, please consider subscribing. It really helps me keep these tales coming. And while you're here, let me know in the comments where you're listening from. Now let's get into the story. I've been staring at the blinking red light on the console for hours now. Each flash reminds me that my voice might still be carrying through dead air, drifting across what's left of our country. I don't know if anyone can hear me. Not anymore. The official channels went quiet 5 days ago, maybe longer. Time has lost its usual meaning down here. I'm Sergeant Michael Crane, assigned to Bunker Station Delta 17. My original job was simple enough. Maintain communication lines, relay supply requests, transmit official updates from command. But command hasn't called in. My last direct order was a one-line text message. Stand by. Situation evolving. Then everything went silent. I hope this broadcast finds someone, anyone, who's still out there. That's the only reason I keep talking into this microphone. Maybe if you're listening, you'll know you're not alone. And maybe I'll feel less alone too. Day 1, or so they called it. The zombie outbreak started slowly, at least from our vantage point. The news channels mentioned an unknown illness spreading in several regions, but the bulletins didn't seem too worried. They never do in the beginning. We received a few coded messages about quarantines. Our job was to stand by, remain calm, and be prepared to relay further instructions. At first, the entire operation felt procedural. We tested the radio frequencies, inventoried our rations, and performed maintenance checks on the doors. The bunker's design is nothing special. A main control room, barracks for about a dozen personnel, a small medical bay, a supplies area, and a heavy steel entrance sealed by 2 massive hinges. We had a generator that could run for months if needed, though it constantly rattled and whined. I was on shift with Corporal Fisher and Private Rhodes. We took turns monitoring comms, checking if any new bulletins popped up. We joked about it at first. Another drill, we said, or we'll be out of here soon. None of us realized how fast the situation outside would unravel. 3 days after the first mention of the illness, our orders turned urgent. A scrambled broadcast from a field commander came through, voice shaky. Bunker Delta 17, do you read? The infection is spreading. Casualties? High. Requesting an immediate lockdown protocol. Prepare for potential infiltration. Then, static. We tried to get a location or any details about what had happened, but all we heard was the hiss of empty static. Our bunker's entrance slammed shut with a thunderous clang a few minutes later, triggered by an automated security protocol. That was the moment everything got real. The perimeter cameras, which we could cycle through on a small monitor, showed people gathering outside the chain-link fence that surrounded the facility. Some stumbled, some ran. Most looked disoriented. When the feed cut out, no one said a word. We just stared at each other, suddenly aware that our world had just changed forever. In the following days, we tried to maintain structure. That's what they teach you in training. Keep calm, follow procedure, stick to a schedule. 7 o'clock, wake up. 7:30, eat breakfast rations together. 8 o'clock, check external sensors, test radio communications. 9 o'clock, inspect generator and fuel supply. 10 o'clock to 18 o'clock, rotate shifts between rest, exercise and overwatch on the cameras. We repeated these steps day in and day out, even though we had no contact from above. It felt comforting to act like we still had a purpose. The only problem was, as we kept scanning frequencies, the airwaves remained quiet. Occasionally, we'd catch a faint burst of static that might have been a voice, but we could never make out any words. Corporal Fisher tried to lighten the mood. Maybe they got it under control up there. We'll get a call soon. But her smile never reached her eyes. One evening, as we were winding down for the night, a new noise reached us. It was a soft scraping on the thick metal door at the end of the corridor. We all froze. For half an hour, no one said anything. We just listened to that scraping, occasionally broken by what sounded like muffled thuds. Then, just as suddenly, it stopped. Private Rhodes grabbed a rifle and crept up to the door. He pressed an ear against the metal, but there was nothing. We checked the security feed from the small external camera near the entrance. The camera showed partial darkness, broken only by a flickering overhead lamp. No movement. We rationalized it as debris or maybe an animal. Deep down, we suspected it was neither. 2 days later, we realized we had a bigger problem. Water pressure began fluctuating, and the generator's power output occasionally dipped, causing lights to flicker. The bunker was designed to operate independently, but only if the maintenance crew on the outside could periodically restock the fuel tanks. Now, we had to conserve energy, shutting off lights in unused corridors and limiting non-essential equipment. There was also the morale issue. With the world above seemingly gone, every conversation turned dark. Fisher tried to keep spirits up, but Rhodes grew quiet. He spent hours in the hallway by the door, listening for any sound on the other side. Sometimes I heard him whispering under his breath, repeating, "We can't be alone down here. We can't be alone." I decided to focus on my role as a radio operator. I scanned every frequency I could find, searching for any sign of life. Every so often, a faint crackle would trick me into thinking someone was about to speak. But nothing came through. It was like standing in a dark room, waiting for a light switch to click on. On what I believe was our 12th day in lockdown, I picked up something strange over an old military frequency. It was faint, almost inaudible. If anyone, listening, help. Then it faded back into nothingness. I shouted for the others, fumbled with the dials, and tried to transmit. "This is Delta 17. We read you. Please repeat." No response. I spent hours that night replaying the short burst of audio over and over, hoping to catch a detail. Was it a man's voice? A woman's? Were they close or distant? I couldn't tell, but it gave me a flicker of hope. Someone was still out there. The next night, the scraping returned. This time, it was louder. I was on watch when it started. A slow, repetitive drag across the steel. Rhodes and Fisher ran to meet me in the control room. We checked the external camera once more. For a moment, I thought it was broken or covered by dust. But then we saw a hand. It pressed against the lens, smudging the view. A person stood in front of the door, staring into the camera. We couldn't see their face clearly, only the ragged outlines of their uniform and the way they tilted their head. Rhodes grabbed his rifle again. "We should let them in," he insisted. "That could be one of ours." Fisher hesitated. "We have orders to maintain quarantine. We don't know if they're infected." The hand slid down the camera lens, leaving a long streak. We watched the figure slump, then vanish off to the side. The scraping continued for a few more minutes, then went quiet again. No one slept well that night. The next few days, we tried to pretend that encounter never happened. We stuck to our schedule, though it felt more hollow each day. The supply inventory was still decent, enough for several weeks if we continued rationing. The real worry was water and power. The generator made sputtering noises, as if it might fail at any moment. Fisher suggested we do a controlled reset of the generator. It would require shutting everything down for a short period. We didn't like the idea of being without lights, air filtration or communications, if only briefly, but we agreed it was necessary. The plan was to do it first thing in the morning. That morning we turned off the main breakers and waited in total darkness. The silence felt oppressive, broken only by our breathing. Even though it lasted mere minutes, the darkness stretched on like an eternity. When the lights flickered back, I felt a profound sense of relief. I hurried to the console, reactivating the radio and scanning for signals again. At first, everything was routine. Static on every channel, no immediate changes. Then the motion sensor alert flashed red. We checked the hallway camera near the door. 2 figures stood there this time. They both wore tattered uniforms. One reached up to the camera lens again, as if they knew we were watching. Fisher breathed out. "They're wearing our insignia." I couldn't tell for sure through the grainy feed, but I felt a hollow chill in my stomach. We braced for more scraping or pounding, but instead we heard something else. Voices. It was faint, as though carried through a vent or a crack in the bunker's structure. It sounded like hushed conversation, though we couldn't make out distinct words. Rhodes pressed his ear against the corridor wall. His eyes were wide. "They're talking," he whispered. "They're trying to talk to us." At that point, panic set in. Should we open the door? Should we retreat deeper into the bunker? Fisher tried to hail them on the external intercom, her voice shaking. "This is Bunker Delta 17. If you can understand me, please identify yourself." No response on the speaker, but the faint voices continued, too soft for us to discern. That night, while the voices whispered beyond the walls, I picked up another broadcast. It was even fainter than before. "Extraction. Not safe. Hold out as long as can." I repeated the words into the microphone. "Say again, please. This is Sergeant Michael Crane at Delta 17. We need assistance. Over." No reply came back. Maybe I imagined it, or maybe whoever sent that message no longer had the equipment to respond again. Still, I clung to those broken syllables. Extraction. There was some hope, right? The next morning, Rhodes marched to the door with determination. "I'm opening it," he said flatly. "They might be from command, or survivors. We can't leave them out there." Fisher and I argued. We pointed out the potential danger of infection, the strict orders to stay sealed, and the possibility that we'd lose the bunker entirely if we let the outside in. Rhodes wouldn't listen. He said he could at least speak with them through the partial locking mechanism in the antechamber. Against our better judgment, we agreed on a compromise. We'd open the inner door of the two-door system, keeping the outer door sealed, so Rhodes could attempt communication in the small space between. If the unknown individuals seemed safe, we could reevaluate. We used the manual override to open the first door. The thick steel groaned as it slid open, revealing a dimly lit chamber. The outer door was still locked, but we could see two silhouettes pressed against it. Rhodes called out, "Identify yourselves." They reacted, shifting as if they heard him clearly. One of them seemed to mouth words, but we heard nothing through the reinforced door. Then, with startling speed, the silhouettes began pounding on the metal. Their movements looked unnatural, as though driven by desperation or something worse. Rhodes stepped back, shaken. "Close it," he whispered. "Close it now." We slammed the inner door shut, locking it with trembling hands. For hours, the pounding on the outer door echoed through the bunker. Then it stopped. After that, Rhodes hardly spoke. Fisher became more diligent, rechecking systems, triple-checking ration counts. She no longer joked about going home soon. I could see the fear in her eyes, a silent acceptance that this might be our new reality forever. Time blurred again. We attempted to maintain our schedule, but each passing day felt heavier. The lights flickered more often, and every beep from the bunker's sensors made us jump. No further signals came in through the radio, just background static, like a never-ending hiss. We took turns sleeping in the control room, unwilling to stray too far from each other. None of us wanted to be alone. Eventually, the generator's condition became critical. One evening, the lights dimmed so low we could barely see. The fans slowed, making the air thick and stale. We scrambled to keep power going, rerouting what little fuel we had left. Despite our efforts, we knew we were running on borrowed time. At the same moment, an alarm beeped on the console. It indicated potential exterior tampering. We switched on the external cameras, only to see the lens covered by what looked like a hand again. This time, multiple hands. The silhouettes moved around the entrance. The pounding returned, steady and methodical, as though they were trying to break through. That night, I made another broadcast. My voice trembled, but I tried to stay professional. "This is Sergeant Michael Crane of Bunker Delta 17. broadcasting on all frequencies. Our power is nearly depleted. We have limited rations. If anyone is out there, we request instructions, assistance, or any confirmation of activity. Please respond. I repeated variations of that message for what felt like hours, but the radio remained silent. A creeping dread settled in my mind. We were alone. The next day, we discovered a small hatch in the maintenance corridor that, according to the bunker schematics, led to an underground service route. Perhaps it was designed for emergency repairs to power lines or a hidden supply pathway. Fisher and Rhodes debated whether we should open it. Some part of us feared it might lead to a worse fate. Another part felt it was our only chance to escape if the main door was compromised. In the end, we sealed the hatch from our side and decided not to venture down. We told ourselves we still had a chance to be rescued here. Leaving the bunker felt like an even greater gamble, but I couldn't shake the feeling that we might be making a fatal mistake by staying put. On what I believe was our 20th or 30th day, time was a blur. I got one final burst of radio chatter. It was garbled beyond recognition, but there were words in it. Someone was definitely speaking. I caught only 2 phrases before the transmission cut out. Containment breach. Bravo sector lost. All units retreat, no further contact. Then silence. It sounded like all hope of containment had failed. If Bravo sector was gone, that likely meant the entire network of bunkers or safe zones was compromised. We had nowhere to go. As days went by, the scraping, pounding, and whispering around our bunker's walls grew more frequent. It was as if more of them had gathered, all trying to get in. Sometimes we heard them right behind the steel, sometimes around the ventilation shafts. Once or twice, it sounded like they were trying to speak actual words, but the tones were strange and unsettling. Rhodes began to talk about going outside again, in one desperate mission to secure the perimeter. Fisher reminded him that we had no knowledge of how many were out there. Our cameras showed only shadows and the occasional glimpse of tattered uniforms. We'd all witnessed how quickly they could move, how tirelessly they kept returning. The generator is failing more often. The lights flicker so frequently that sometimes I can't tell if I'm staring into my own reflection in the darkness, or if I'm seeing movement in the corner. My breath feels heavy in this stale air. Fisher tried to set up a manual crank for the radio system, so we'd at least be able to transmit after the generator finally goes. But it's only a temporary solution. Every time the lights go out completely, the bunker's interior becomes a black void. We can't keep living like this indefinitely. I've been broadcasting as often as I can, telling our story to the empty airwaves. I keep hoping someone will hear our call, but with each passing hour, that hope wanes. Sometimes I wonder if anyone is even out there to listen. Now, as I dictate this message, the faint pounding on the door continues. It never truly goes away. At times it sounds like they're trying to speak. I'm not sure I want to know what they're saying, or if they even understand us. Fisher is in the corridor, making another attempt to brace the door with whatever metal she can find. Rhodes is near the hatch, staring at it like he's about to open it and never look back. I'm at the console, broadcasting to whomever might still care. Our supplies won't last forever. The generator might fail any minute, and the whispers outside are growing louder. If you're listening, if you're somehow picking up my voice, please stay safe. Use caution if you try to reach us. I can't promise you'll find anything but darkness and echoing halls when you arrive. But we're here, still holding on. For now. No official rescue team has shown up. No new orders have come. And each hour, the chance of a miracle fades. But we're not giving up. Not yet. This is Sergeant Michael Crane, Bunker Delta 17. Signing off, at least until the next broadcast. Transmission ends. And in that quiet, the red light on the console stops blinking. The radio, once the last link to the outside world, goes still. Faint footsteps echo beyond the sealed corridor, joined by distant, halting voices. Whether they are friend or foe remains unknown. The only certain thing is that Bunker Delta 17 still stands, hidden from the world above, waiting in the silence. Somewhere, in the darkness, Sergeant Michael Crane keeps watch, hoping for a sign or a knock that won't be followed by fear. Thank you for listening. If your heart raced even a little, be sure to like and subscribe for more eerie narratives. Your support is what keeps this channel alive. Until next time, stay vigilant and remember, curiosity can be quite the companion, and sometimes a curse.